You know what? I might not be going my own way for the same reasons you're going your own way. Or even maybe the same reasons that the majority of men who are going their own way go their own way. You see, if tomorrow, by the wave of some magic wand, let's just say, thought experiment, all the problems and dangers associated with divorce and loss of assets and children and all that jazz, if that were to disappear magically, such that there were no danger whatsoever, I still wouldn't get married. You see, long before I became a red pillar, a purple pillar, when I was a certified blue pillar, I never had any interest in marriage. And now, in advanced stages of having taken the red pill, I'm even less interested. But it has nothing to do with the laws. I could give a rat's ass about the laws. It's about freedom. You see, I'm the opposite of the man that Esther Villain describes. You know, the man who chains himself to his job, who prefers slavery, who prefers the illusion of comfort offered to him by his female companion. I'm the man who prefers freedom to all of that. You see, I don't want to come home from work and have someone tell me, dictate to me, or at least attempt to dictate to me, you need to do this and that. And in my free time, on my work-free days, I don't want someone to tell me, you shouldn't do that, you should be doing that, you can't do that, you promised to do X, Y, Z. That doesn't interest me. It never has, and it interests me even less now. So, if, by the wave of a magic wand, all of those laws were overturned and everything were peachy keen and hunky-dory, back to the good old days, I still wouldn't get married. And maybe that differentiates me from other men going the right. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't care. I think freedom for me is the ultimate selling point of going your own way. You have to think about it this way. Life is incredibly short and brief and filled with pain and anguish and illness. We all become ill at some point in time and we all die. Some of us quite wretchedly. Some others have better luck with that and don't. And in this brief smidgen of time that we call life, you are told that you are a person, a being of service. And see, it's funny that the so-called individualists, the guys running around without naming names who like to call us, who insinuate very heavily that single people in general, and specifically that men going their own way, are parasites, even though we all support ourselves, that we have a duty to the rest of the world, a duty to civilization. These are the anti-collectivists telling us that we have a duty to the rest of humanity, essentially. Kind of odd how that works, I think. And it's funny how, in my humble opinion, that if these laws and problems, legal problems, were overturned and reversed, I think everything would go back to, quote-unquote, hunky-dory, peachy-keen, good old days. I'm not going to say his name, but I remember a while back having a conversation with a fairly high-up member of A Voice for Men, literally telling me that he would have no problem being a utility, or rather he has no problem being a utility as long as he's rewarded for it. Of course, the draft horse pulling the cart that gets the carrot and the apple, that draft horse is rewarded for his work too, and I suppose that draft horse is content as well, because he's getting rewarded for it. Well, not me. I care about my freedom. And the only obligations I have are the obligations I choose to have to the people I choose to associate with and the people I choose to be concerned about. And that, in the eyes of many apparently, is parasitic. Parasitic, how so? I have no idea. The so-called anti-collectivists who label men going their own way, hardly a uniform group, hardly a group without various speciations, if you will. Collectivists, they're the ones telling us we have a duty to civilization and a duty to the world and humanity. Well, I'm not buying it. That's not to say I'm not interested in civilization, or even promoting a more advanced form of it, and my forthcoming video, if it ever gets done, will be about just that. In many ways, at least. It'll be one of the many topics covered. But We have this incredibly brief life filled with anguish and pain and suffering and very little joy for the most part, and then oblivion thereafter, and we're supposed to just give up our freedom. You have an obligation to do so, apparently, and if you don't, you're a parasite. It's bizarre, it makes no sense, it's not particularly logical, but there you have it. This is the argument of many, and even those who don't argue that way still ultimately would, as Barbarossa canonically said once, abandon ship for the sake of the blowjob, because the blowjob is somehow associated with a reward. If you're a tool, it's okay. If you're used, and maybe you get a new paint job, or you get a fine tuning, right? That doesn't interest me. It never has. So maybe I'm a freak in this regard as going my own way, but like I said, if everything were to just transform on the morn, I would still be going my own way, and I wouldn't get married, and I wouldn't be pursuing relationships. Now that said, far from it, far from a person that actually shuns people. I mean, I don't shun men or women. I have no problem associating with women. I have no interest in a sexual relationship with women whatsoever. But I judge people on the merits, usually of their mind. And if I can associate with them and get along with them, I will. It doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman. I don't care. I care not. If I can have productive, interesting, stimulating conversation with an individual, male or female, I will engage that person. I will spend the exact amount of time with a female as with a male, if that person is willing to nourish, or can nourish rather, and wants to nourish, and likewise I am nourishing that person's mind, then I will allot the same amount of time, irrespective of the gender. See? But here I go, hating and shunning women. That's not how I operate. It just so happens, unfortunately, that most of the nether apes in the world, I'd argue there are almost as many male nether apes as there are female, but for the most part, women rarely, if ever, provide stimulating conversation, tend not to think in the abstract, are extremely pragmatic to the point of ignoring anything beyond what's in front of their own eyes. And although there are many men who do this too, the numbers are slightly fewer, and hence why I tend to associate with men. But since I'm not interested in any sexual relationship whatsoever with women, that is to say functionally asexual, I don't care about your gender, whether you're male or female. I will associate with you regardless, if your mind fulfills my personal prerequisites for association. That's how I operate. That's how I work. And maybe I'm different, once again, in this regard, from other men going their own way. As if men going their own way were some giant monolith. The collectivists, we are the collectivists, aren't we? Hardly. But I'm quite convinced that if tomorrow everything were to change and go back to the good old days, people would just forget about it all. They would forget about it and they would pretend, because pretending is what men do exceptionally well. They do it day and night, most of them, and they lie to themselves, and they do it gleefully as well. So let's say there were no financial danger involved in marriage. Men would go back on the morn to lying to themselves. I have no doubt about this. They would go back and they would pretend that the beat-up used Toyota, which is now being used as an analogy for his wife, is in fact a brand spanking new Ferrari. And this from someone who has no interest in automobiles whatsoever. They would pretend because pretending, the illusion, makes them feel good. If you recall from my previous video on the desire for unfreedom, it's that strong. So you would see men en masse just going back to the so-called good old days, pretending that women love them for who they are, although some not. Some would gleefully and gladly return to a state of rewarded utilitarianism. But you would see this. I'm utterly convinced of this. And there's no problem with that. Let the entire world do whatever it wants. Just leave me as an individual in peace. and let me do my thing. And don't call me a parasite. A parasite? Are we parasites? Parasites, those of us who do our best to work to support ourselves, wish for nothing but to be left alone, are then told that we have an obligation to the rest of the world, to civilization. And by following such a lifestyle, such people, such as myself, we are called collectivists. It's bizarre, the logic. I mean, people saying that you have an obligation and duty to the rest of civilization, to humanity, and you're a collectivist, which, as I said, has nothing to do with a lack of interest in civilization per se. I am profoundly interested in new methodologies for advancing civilization, if you will, but it's a bit absurd. So, going your own way can mean quite literally whatever the fuck you want it to mean. It's about, I personally believe, as disparate a group of individuals, of men, as you're going to get. No one follows a particular path in this regard. Some men who go their own way still pursue relationships. Some just fuck on the side. Some do what I do. It's all different. And of course, to me, to my own path of going my own way, it's extremely important to understand the fundamentals of human behavior, of both male and female behavior, by examining that. Of course, when you examine human biology, once again, you are collectivist. It's really bizarre, don't you think? But I think at this point in time, the word collectivist has lost so much meaning that it is now without meaning. Collectivist, leftist, Marxist, collectivist, Marxist, crypto-fascist, Marxist, crypto-leftist, gay agenda pushing, and so on and so forth. It just, loses all of its oomph, if you will. So I just wanted to make this video just to remind us all that we're all individuals and we all do whatever the fuck we want. There is no such thing as men going their own way for everyone, because each man going his own way is doing his own thing. And that's also the right way of it, in my opinion. My humble opinion. That's the way it should be. So, freedom. For me, freedom, that's what it's all about, what it comes down. The freedom to do what I want, to not do what I don't want to do, and not have some harridan or anyone else telling me when I come home from work or on my free days, you need to do this, you need to do that. Remember, brief life. If you're lucky, you'll live 80 years. If you're really lucky, there won't be much illness or pain involved, but probably not. But you're supposed to live a life of service to the rest of the world. You're supposed to do what you're told, and you're supposed to be a utility, a rewarded utility. You're supposed to be the happy draft horse that pulls the cart, gets that carrot and apple. Maybe you'll get 2 apples if you're really lucky, but you're still attached to that harness and you're still pulling the cart now, aren't you? Anyway, some food for thought. Everyone, take care. Have a good night.